NFL draft or NHL draft, now I got to get it locked back in, is Friday. Canes have 6 picks. I have them right here for you. I'll read them in a second, but we're obviously going to decide what they should do here. Round 1, 29th overall. Then they don't have a pick till 87th overall in the 3rd round. They have a 4th rounder, 125, a 6th rounder, 2 6th rounders actually, 183 and 189, and then a 7th rounder, 221. So the 2 6th and the 7th, you're throwing darts at best. If you can maneuver around to find somebody who you have a hunch on, go for it. But
although if any team has better acumen at snagging a late round pick
darts,
like a Jacob Slavin, I mean, look no further than the Canes.
Sometimes I do wonder, even if like you truth serumed them.
It's like, oh, we had no idea.
We kind of he played the right position and he was the right height. We just kind of rolled with it. They'll never say that, but I think that happens a lot more than you think. I love hearing the stories, 10 years after a draft when a 4th rounder becomes all-star and there's some scout like, I stood on the table for him. I'm like, then you're a lunatic. You stood on the table for a guy that every team had passed on 3 and 4 times. I think you probably went, I don't know, I like him. I think he's a good chance in the 4th. But in your history, it's like a fishing story, right? Fish was like, 4 pounds. 10 years from now, Moby Dick, right? I fought with it for 8 hours before we got it in the boat. I think usually those late round picks, if anyone ever tries to claim like, I knew Tom Brady was a Hall of Famer when we drafted him in the 6th. No, you didn't. You would have drafted him in the 5th because you didn't want to give anyone a chance to take him in the 6th.
Well, maybe if you'd asked the lady that called in yesterday and said she was she knew Tom Brady, they were neighbors.
Said she used to party with Tom. Said he didn't party much. He was a good kid, but she used to party at the neighbor's house with Tom Brady. The Drive with Tim Donnelly, 99.9 The Fan. I love, of the drafts, the NBA has the most immediate impact, right? You can draft one guy, change everything. The NFL draft has the most pomp and circumstance, right? They have 300,000 people there to watch guys walk across stage. I think my favorite drafts, if I were a scout, would be the NHL and MLB. Because I don't want to say they're the easiest to prepare for, but they're the most straightforward to prepare for. You are going with every pick, if I were the GM or the owner, best player available. I'll be darned if I'm making position-specific decisions with draft picks in a sport where guys don't always make it to the pros. Right? Guys don't even always advance to the NHL level. So, if you're picking like top 5 and you think these guys are ready to plug and play, if you have, Bedard didn't take a long time in the AHL, get what I'm saying? If you have one of those, sure, then that's a different beast. But for 99% of these picks, best player available. We are going to talk about it. We have talked about it. We are going to continue to talk about it. The Canes need centers. They do. If you're sitting there at the 29th pick and you have 3 defensemen and a winger as your 4 best players on the board and number 5 is a center, I will forbid you from taking that center. It is hard enough in the NHL to just draft good players. So if you have the whatever increases your opportunity of drafting a future NHL contributor, you do that. And then if, 2-3 years from now, they're ready to get the call up, a year from now, whenever it is, depending on how fast it is, if they're not at a position of need, that's when you can turn them into a position of need, if that makes any sense. I'll put it another way. In Major League Baseball and the NHL, aside from, I'd say, maybe the top 3 or 4 picks on any given draft, you're drafting assets as much as you're drafting players, right? I've seen, what is this guy, Collins. I've seen this guy, like all of these players that are being mocked to the Canes at 29. Great. Okay. Do you know it's really frustrating to me when you see like a team win the World Series or a team win the Stanley Cup and you see a fan base get really mad because they drafted the player that ended up being a star? Oh, we drafted him. We let him go. And I'm like, you traded him the moment he hit 300 in rookie ball as part of a package to get a platoon first baseman, and they did all the work to develop him, right? You just drafted him because he had some traits, he had some skills. Maybe you talked to a coach that you trusted that said he had something possible there. You're just drafting assets. Once they get to the NHL, they're players, right? Think of it like I don't care if you have and I know goalies aren't drafted super high very often. Like, I don't care if you have a 25-year-old Vezina winner. If you have a super high pick, high rating on a goalie, you draft him. Hopefully, he plays lights out in the AHL, and you trade him for whatever position you do need. Or in a spot month where your starter gets hurt, he comes up and he doesn't give up any goals, and boom, now you have one of the most attractive pieces on the entire trade market. Right? The cliches are cliches for a reason. You can't go broke making a profit. If with the 29th pick, they draft a player who's worth the 27th pick, that's a good pick. I don't care the position. I don't care. It's part of the reason why I like that the Canes have such an analytic-heavy presence because, hey, we don't care if they're small. We don't care if they're right-handed, left-handed. We take the best players in the draft, particularly the ones that we have deemed their flaw that has allowed them to fall to the bottom of the first round doesn't matter. Then you make that draft pick, you pick the player, and you deal with it as it gains value. Right? Bradley Nadeau might never play for the Canes. Bradley Nadeau was a first-round pick out of Maine. It was a very quintessential Canes pick in that he's a smaller guy, he's a forward, but the analytics liked him, and they took him, back half of the first round. Then continued his college career, went to the AHL, made the All-Prospects team. That's a good pick. He might never play for the Canes. If this draft season that we're about to go into, leading up to the draft and then leading into free agency, if this offseason of movement happens the way that I think it will, there might even be a good chance that Bradley Nadeau never plays for the Canes. Do you think it matters if they drafted a winger or a defenseman when it's a player that's never going to play for them? No, it matters that you drafted the best player that's worth the most when you get to this point. And then obviously, if you draft a third rounder and it turns into Alexander Nikishin, and he's for multiple seasons considered to be the best defenseman not in the NHL playing over in Russia in the KHL, you make room for him on your lineup. Right? You don't re-sign Orlov because Nikishin needs a place to play. The great players, it's crazy how coaches find a way to get them in the lineup if they're good enough. Draft the best player available. So you might have a type as far as like what your analytics like. Like I said, Canes are notorious or infamous, whatever you want to say, for not minding drafting smaller players. That can be like your philosophy. But just don't go into a draft in the NHL or Major League Baseball with we need a fill-in-the-blank position. You do that in free agency. You do that with trades. In the draft, best player available. BPA. And that's not always true in the NFL, and it's darn sure not always true in the NBA. Right? If you have 3 All-NBA guards, you don't go drafting the point guard. You get a big guy if that's what you need, or you need shooting, whatever, because they can come in and have immediate impact. In the NFL, if you're drafting near the top, better draft a quarterback. If you're in the top 2, 3, because, you hope not to be up there, and a lot of times that's the only place you can get a quarterback of that value without overpaying. In the NHL, again, excluding maybe the top 2 or 3 picks, if there are those generational guys that you draft on like a Monday and you feel comfortable playing on a Tuesday. Aside from those, or you draft on a Friday and you feel comfortable playing in an NHL game on a Monday. Aside from those guys, best player available. Draft is Friday, by the way.